I'm Alex Beard, also known as Obsessive Costuming Dude, author of the Star Trek Costume Guide, and in this video I have with me here an original screen-used TNG Season 2 Admiral uniform. Now, as you may be aware, there were 4 different versions of the Admiral uniform seen over the course of the Next Generation, not counting all the minor little changes and variations and everything. And this is the second version of the Admiral uniform we saw on the show, by costume designer Dorinda Rice Wood. It's possibly the most obscure TNG era uniform, at least in terms of screen time. We only ever saw it twice. Once on Admiral Nakamura, whose uniform this is, at the beginning of the excellent and fan-favorite episode The Measure of a Man, and then again later that season, almost at the end of the season, in the episode The Emissary. Admiral Gromit contacted the Enterprise and gave it its new orders, just briefly appearing on the view screen, although curiously without a communicator. I don't know what's up with that. But these two appearances gave us, this uniform a grand total of 1.5 minutes of screen time in the entirety of Star Trek canon. But there's so much more to this uniform than meets the eye. And I've documented it thoroughly on my blog, the Star Trek Costume Guide. You can check it out, www.startrekcostumeguide.com. But I want to give you a video tour of the costume as well. I've done a few of these now, and it seems to be something people really enjoy. But first, I want to thank Angelo Cafaldi for letting me examine this uniform, study it, document it, share my research with you here and on the blog. So thank you, Angelo. And also, I want to mention there's a special treat for you at the end of the video. So let's take a look at this thing. Let's start with the jacket. And probably the two most obvious aspects of the jacket are the colors and the fabrics. Obviously, the yoke is black, but the body of the jacket is, it's always so surprising to me to see these screen-used uniforms in person because they look so red in the show, but they're actually in person a much more of a kind of berry color, almost purplish. But they photograph as red for some reason. I'm not an expert on cameras and lighting, and it may even look red right now on your computer monitor wherever you're watching this. But in person, it's definitely a purplish berry kind of color. And I have it here with me, a few visual aids to kind of show you as a reference what color this actually is. First, I have some biking red wrinklies, which is kind of a cotton twill fabric from my local Joann, standard retail color. And just compare it to the color of this jacket. You can see how much blue there is in this red and how purpley it is compared to the biking red color. So there's that, and I did my best to actually match the color with a few things. I have here a spool of thread. If I can find the end of it here. It's a Coats & Clark 3090. There it goes. Red plum, and it's the same color that I picked out for the Admiral Jameson Season 1 jacket. If you've watched that video, it wasn't an exact match for that jacket, and it's not an exact match for this one either, but it's pretty close. Just not quite dark enough. So again, that's Coats & Clark 3090 Red Plum. And I picked up a Pantone book, but it wasn't particularly useful. It's a little disappointing because I couldn't, you know, there are like thousands of colors in this thing, but the closest one I found was 228U. But it's nowhere near dark enough to be a decent match. I'll show you here. So it's not a great match, but that's the closest one in the book, for whatever that's worth. But I did find a good match. I went to Lowe's and looked at the paint chips, and I found one that oddly it looked like a perfect match in the store, but then I got home and it looked terrible. So your mileage may vary, but this 1011-7 Perfect Plum. was near perfect match in the store. Of course here on camera probably looks terrible. It's weird, like in some lighting it looks perfect, and you know, sometimes it looks awful. So, you know, we're trying to match paper to fabric, so, you know, I don't even know if that's entirely possible. And of course it's glossy paper too. So, you see from here, it looks terrible, but then, you know, do away with some of that sheen. It's pretty close. So again, that's 1011-7, perfect plum. Oh, that's a Valspar, by the way. I guess I should have mentioned the brand. Sorry about that. Valspar 1011-7, perfect plum. And I also have a few swatches I picked up of screen-used fabrics from uniforms, costume cards. One here, it's a Riker swatch. And it's basically a spot-on, almost perfect match for this jacket, which is pretty cool. I don't know how well you can see that. Hopefully it's not too dark. Let me turn my light. I usually use that light, but I didn't use it with this because it makes the jacket look magenta, which is definitely not. It's purpley, but not magenta. Let me flip it over to the back. It's lighter. There we go. I hope you can see it. I have some pictures on the blog. Pictures may be better than what I'm trying to do here. So that Riker swatch on the costume card is a near perfect match, both in terms of color and in terms of weave, which brings me to my next point. The fabric used for the body of the jacket is not jumbo spandex like the other early TNG era uniforms. It's actually superfine wool gabardine. So yeah, I think you can see the really small diagonal weave here in the fabric. Superfine wool gabardine, which, to the best of my knowledge, this is actually the first TNG era uniform to not be made out of jumbo spandex and instead be made out of a woven fabric. And with it being superfine wool gabardine, you know, that's really significant because, of course, that's what the men's uniforms would be made out of. The next year, when costume designer Robert Blackman came in and took over, he made those jackets with the fabric, and with the Riker swatch being a near perfect match to this, it could even be off the same roll or order of fabric, or however they acquired their fabric. So there's a close look at it. But the interestingly, the yoke is not superfine wool gabardine. I think it's wool crepe or crepe. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's the same letters as crepe, but crepe kind of makes more sense. And the E's might have those little slashes over them too, so I'll look that up. I don't know why costume designer Dorinda Rice Wood, you know, I don't know why she didn't use matching black superfine wool gabardine, like for the jacket body. Instead, it's a contrasting fabric. But there it is. And by the way, I don't know that that's wool crepe, whatever. It's just my guess. I think that's what it is. But you can see the yoke trim is the same superfine wool gabardine, or at least the red backing of it, and the red portion of it. It's more of a trim assembly. It's bias cut superfine wool gabardine. And so is the collar. But then this fabric, the contrast fabric, the yoke fabric, was used to make the piping around the top of the collar. And it was used for the back portion of the sleeve trim. And also the piping at the bottom of the sleeves, too, is that same fabric. So yeah, it's custom-made piping for the bottom of the sleeves and the top of the collar. You know, the same fabric as the yoke. So we have two different fabrics on the jacket. And we have the superfine wool gabardine, and then the mystery fabric, which I think is the wool crepe, whatever. So now let's take a look at the upper area of the jacket. So there's the collar that I mentioned before, and the collar is actually in three pieces. There's the back. So here's the center back. Here's the side seam. You can see it's just slightly offset from the shoulder seam. Tiny bit, just like 1/8 of an inch on both sides. I don't know if that's on purpose, you know, by design, or you know, if that just happened. So it was made in a hurry or slight miscalculation, who knows. But there's also the front. The front is all one piece. Goes from side to side there, from side seam to side seam, I mean. And these rank bars are the original screen used ones, which is pretty cool. They're pin-backed. Unlike the later ones that attach by snaps, these actually, you know, attached with the pins there on the back. And what's weird is the collar was hand sewn, was attached by hand. I mean, it wasn't machine sewn. I wasn't expecting that. You can see the little stitches here. If you look inside, the neckline seam allowance actually wasn't sewn into the collar. It's just, you know, kind of there. So I wonder if the collar was, you know, a later addition, or if, I don't know. It's weird. But you can see the last, if you pull that seam allowance back, you can see the last of the white thread there marking the neckline, the seam line. That's pretty interesting. And like I said, this piping here is the yoke fabric. It's 3/16 of an inch wide. It's a recurring motif in early TNG. You know, we saw it on the jumpsuits and the skants, and season 1 admiral jacket, Pulaski's medical smock. So 3/16 is kind of the recurring idea. It's cool. The collar has this little point there at the lower front. It's not completely round. And on the yoke, there's a center front seam. I would theorize that the center front seam is there to accommodate the seam at the front yoke trim here. That's just theory. Which leads me to next thing I want to point out. This yoke trim here is, like I mentioned before, the red portion is bias cut superfine wool gabardine. Same is used on the jacket body. And I think it was done in two pieces, because if you look here on the front, you can actually see the seams, the little seams in the bias fabric. So you can see there's a little bias seam here. There's another one there, and they don't, you see, they don't line up. So I think these two were separate pieces for some reason. And on top, of course, is this black ribbon trim that some of the more aficionados out there, you guys and ladies, may recognize by its counterpart trim that was used on the TNG era formal uniforms. I don't know exactly what the stuff is. It's like a nylon-ish kind of ribbon with metal studs. You know, there have been some theories floating around that maybe it's a metallic ribbon woven in, or it was embroidered, any number of ideas, but they're actually metal studs attached to this trim. And here's the real kicker. I don't know about you, but I always thought they were just two different colors, gold and silver. But I was quite surprised to find that there are actually three colors. There's gold, silver, and then like a bronze-ish kind of color. I don't know how clearly you can see that right now. Let me turn on my light. Let's see if that changes it. Yeah, if you look at the top and bottom colors, you can see they're actually not the same. I mean, you would never see that in the show, of course. They just look like little shiny metal. But anyway, I don't know how well that's showing up right now, but I have some HD photos of it up on the blog, and you can see how it's not two golds, it's gold and bronze. You know, because of course. And the yoke trim wasn't machine sewn. It was hand sewn. It was attached to the yoke by hand. Hang on, let me turn off the light. If you look underneath, let me flip it around. If you look underneath, you can see the hand stitching. There's a machine sewn stitch line that's kind of a guideline, but it was attached by hand on the underside. Not entirely sure why. I think it was to accommodate this trim with the metal studs. You can't sew through those. I mean, you could try, but you'll probably either end up shattering your needle or shattering the studs, or both. So you want to wear safety goggles if you try that. But if you look on the outside of the shoulder, you can see the seam allowance right there was not sewn into the shoulder seam. That trim was definitely attached after the yoke was assembled and then hand sewn. Oh, and what I was saying before about shattering the studs, you can see on the back. I'm guessing that somebody figured out the hard way that you can't sew through those. Either that or just over time, stuff happened. Here on the sleeve, at the bottom of the sleeve, you can see that same trim, but it's on top of a black backing like was used on the yoke. It's a kind of cool design motif on this jacket. Kind of a V shape, you know, on the inner sleeve seam, or under sleeve seam, whatever you want to call it. And they meet there, and then they go all the way up outside. But this trim was machine sewn. It wasn't hand sewn. There's no hand stitching on the underside. It was definitely attached by machine. But here, hey, you can kind of see the three colors more here for some reason. So anyway, this mythical trim, haven't been able to find it anywhere. Been looking for years. If you have a source of this, or if you know where to find this stuff, please message me, email me, leave a comment down here how to get in touch with you, because I would love to get a hold of some of this trim, and for it to be available to the costuming community too. I know a lot of fans would love to have this. It's really unique. I don't really see anything like it. But the stuff that was used on the formal uniforms only had 2 rows, not 3. So it's not the same trim. I know some people had a theory that these were individual strips that were kind of placed side by side, just however many you wanted. If you wanted 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or whatever you want. But this is definitely one single piece of trim or ribbon or whatever it is. So there was a version that had 3 rows and a version that had 2. Something interesting that you'd probably never see in the show, at least I never saw it in the show. I say the show. Admiral Nakamura's grand total of like 1 minute and 5 seconds of screen time in the episode is princess seams here on the front of the jacket and on the back. Which is pretty cool. We have a long history of princess seams on costumes and military garments and stuff here in the West, but you don't usually see them in the front, though. It's kind of interesting. But here's what's weird is, so this is the men's version of the uniform, obviously, Admiral Nakamura, but it has princess seams. But then Admiral, what's her name? Gromit? And the emissary, I'm blanking on her name, it's embarrassing. The Lady Admiral, who was on screen for 25 seconds in later that season, in season 2, the emissary, the episode with Kalar, where we meet Kalar. She's on screen. We don't see much of her uniform, but there's an auction photo of her uniform, and it does not have princess seams, as near as I can tell. It's a pretty low-res photo, but it looks like it has seams down the front, like this. 2 vertical or semi-vertical, almost vertical seams, kind of like we saw on Dr. Pulaski's the final version of her medical smock, instead of the princess seams. So we have a men's version with princess seams and a women's version with no princess seams, which is kind of the opposite of what you would expect to see. But look, I don't know. I just work here. I don't know if the design was changed. So like this is the early version of the season 2 Admiral, and then she changed the whole design, for later on. So maybe they're different incarnations of the same garment, or if it's a gender-specific thing where like the men's version had these and the women's version didn't. Who knows? We never saw enough of them to really tell. All I know is there are princess seams on this uniform, and it's men's, so it's pretty cool. I forgot to mention the yoke extends onto the upper sleeve, just like all the early TNG era garments did, except this one did it with a woven fabric, which is, pretty interesting. But the princess seam does not go all the way up to that arm's eye seam here. Move it out of the way. On both the front and the back, it goes down a little bit. Again, just like you'd expect on a lady's costume, but whatever. What really sets this jacket apart from the other early TNG uniforms isn't just its design or the fact that it's made with a woven fabric. It's that it's heavily structured and interfaced on the interior. So the collar feels like it has some, maybe some medium weight or heavyweight interfacing or some collar interfacing or whatever. Hardly surprising. The yoke has what feels like some medium weight, possibly even lightweight interfacing. Nothing major. You can see it's still, it has some nice spring to it. It's not stiff as a board. But what's wild is that the front of this jacket is interfaced so much more heavily than I ever imagined. The whole front. It feels like it's backed with some French canvas or heavyweight hair canvas, something Very, very stiff. And possibly some flannel on the inside too, because there's a little bit of bulk in there, and it's a little squishy. Also, what I did not anticipate was that there are 10 channels of boning inside this thing to prop it up and make sure it's nice and smooth. We have a channel on each side of the center front that goes all the way from the hem all the way up to the neckline. So we have a couple here, and then just a little bit outside of that we have another pair here. I'll just show you one side. Can't reach my arm around the tripod conveniently. So right here, you know, it starts about right here. Oh, let me zoom out a little bit. You're not getting the whole picture. So it starts about right here, and it's not vertical. It angles outward a little bit. So it's an inch away from the center front down here, and then 2 inches away up here. So it's at a slight diagonal. You know, it goes up, and that goes up to the yoke seam line. And then right beside this boning, trying to feel it. Where is it? Somewhere in here. Directly beside of it, there's another one that extends, or maybe it's beside this one, I'm sorry. It extends down beneath the yoke, just about 1.5 inches, and goes all the way up to the neckline. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then we have 2 here on the side panel. We have a channel of boning, starts about right here, goes up to right there. I can feel it with my finger, like that. And then we have another one just inside of the side seam. So right here, and it goes all the way up to here. So 5 channels of boning on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on each side. So this thing it's like body armor. I mean, look, I'm lifting it. It doesn't even bend. I mean, I can hold it on my. Can you see this? I hope you're seeing this. It doesn't even like it doesn't drape. It's like a piece of cardboard even. And of course I don't want to break the boning, so I'm not going to really try. But if you try to bend it, this is all that happens. It's like cardboard. It's wild. And there may be more underneath. All I know is there's some kind of heavy interfacing and possibly some flannel or cotton batting or something. I imagine that that's there to smooth it out. Maybe so you don't get the impressions of the boning on the right side. You know, maybe making it nice and smooth so you don't get like lumps. So some flannel or maybe some batting, something like that. So you have the interfacing, possibly some batting and some boning, and the result is just, look how thick that is. Let me zoom in. I mean, it's a 1/4 inch thick. It's crazy. I'll show you the back just so you can kind of compare how thin the back is versus how thick the front is. So yeah, that's some heavy duty structuring right there. You know, of course, the Star Trek thing is, you know, in TNG, Gene Roddenberry, you know, you didn't want you could never have any wrinkles. You had to maintain like that clean line. And, you know, no, Tice's aesthetic, you know, was knit fabrics and minimal structuring, that kind of thing. So maybe with this being the first uniform made with a woven fabric, wood in her costume department, or maybe it's just such overkill trying to keep this thing looking so smooth. I mean, this is possibly the heaviest interfaced costume in all of Star Trek. I don't know. You know, pre JJ era, of course, Kelvin timeline, whatever you want to call it. In the modern era, from TNG to Enterprise. We'll see as I continue my research. But to date, this is the most heavily structured uniform that I've ever seen. I think the center back panels had some interfacing too. The jacket's lined, so I can't just, you know, crack it open and peek inside and see what's in there, but I think that the center back panels were interfaced with a lightweight fusible interfacing. And there are different ways you can tell. Like, I'll see if I can show you. It's more effective in person. I don't know how interesting it is to look at, but I'll show you. If with this hand, if you pull the lining away, and then you rub the fabric together, not only does it feel a little heavier than the rest of the jacket, but you see it's very smooth. There's not resistance if I rub it together. But if I do the same thing here on this side panel, it grinds together. It doesn't want to go. See, it's like trying to rub sandpaper together or whatever. Which with the utility fabric, it'll do it a little bit, but the microphone will probably never pick this up, but there's a sound to it too. It makes kind of a crunchy kind of sound. But again, if we go to the center back, see how smooth it is? So a fusible interfacing would produce that kind of smoothness, but a hair canvas wouldn't. A hair canvas would actually be the opposite. It would be more than that, because hair canvas grabs onto the fabric. Hair canvas, French canvas, Hymo, whatever you want to call it. It grabs onto the fabric, and if you try to do that with it, it just won't do it. It's like rubbing rocks together, or like I said, sandpaper. But a fusible usually has like a smooth backing. So this is very smooth, and it doesn't peel away from the fabric, so it's not like it was backed with, you know, lining or something like that. So, you know, a fusible produces that result. So I think it was interfaced with a fusible, probably to accommodate, or not accommodate, but to stabilize this center back area where the zipper is. And we'll take a look at the zipper in a minute. But that's a good way, if you have a screen use costume and you want to see what kind of interfacing was in it, but you don't want to open it, just reach inside, pull the lining away, and then pull the shell fabric away, and there'll be a layer between those layers. If it's interfaced with the sew-in interfacing anyway, you'll feel the layer between those layers, and then you can kind of feel it and get a sense of its weight, of its stiffness, and that kind of thing. So that's how I came to my conclusion for a lightweight or a medium weight interfacing here on the yoke. And then you can get a sense, you know, with the collar on the front. There are just too many layers to have any idea. You know, it could be 2 layers of heavyweight canvas. I don't know. That's too thick to tell. But when there's just one layer, you can get an idea of what interfacing was used just by pulling the lining back and feeling what's in between, like that. So possible fusible on the back. I didn't feel it anywhere else on the jacket, on the sleeves, or on the side panels, anywhere like that. But so we have a heavily interfaced front, we got the collar, the yoke, and possibly some fusible interfacing on the back. Now let's take a look at the closure system on the jacket, which is pretty cool. We have 3 hook and eye closures here on the collar, the top. Yeah, see those right there. So we're gonna undo those. That bottom one's kind of a chore. There we go. And then beneath that, we have an invisible zipper, a non-separating invisible zipper, I might add, which is interesting. So, let me grab the zipper tab here. Also, the top of the zipper is not left hanging free like we usually see with the TNG era costumes. It's sewn all the way up to the top, with the top of the zipper being flush with the neckline, and then the zipper tab is just kind of just tucked inside for you to do the closures, and it works okay. If you're making one of these, you can leave the top of the zipper open if you want. Yeah, can't hurt. So we open the zipper, and then at the bottom of the jacket, there's another hook and eye closure. So we'll undo that. Oh, it was already undone. Okay, so there's another one right there. We'll undo that. And then the zipper keeps going. So we have, oh, I just jabbed myself on something. Is that the boning poking out? Ooh, God, that was sharp. All right, so we have here a zipper that just keeps going well beyond the bottom of the jacket. It's actually a 30-inch long invisible zipper. So even though it's a non-separating invisible zipper, what's cool about this, this is a really innovative idea, that the zipper, even though it's non-separating, will still open enough for you to put the jacket on. You just have to kind of slip it over your head or whatever, then you put it on, and then you close it right back up, like that. So that's a really innovative idea. I don't know if it was used before now in Star Trek, or if this is a kind of contraption that Dorinda Rice Wood invented. I don't know when it would have been used on Star Trek, except for maybe the motion picture uniforms. I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting. I know it was used later on some later uniforms, like the DS9 to Nemesis era formal uniforms. You know, I've seen it in other places, but this might be the earliest example of it. I don't know. So someone came up with a really cool idea. Maybe it was her. At the bottom of the zipper is a snap. It was just hand sewn to the zipper tape. And then there's a corresponding snap. God, I just stabbed myself again. Corresponding snap here on the left front of the jacket. Just kind of tacked in there. So once the jacket is zipped up, obviously you need somewhere for that excess zipper tape to go. I had assumed that it was tucked into the trousers, but no, there's this little snap right here. So all you do is you just reach around, snap it into place. And there you go. You have a completely concealed closure. It's really neat. The jacket was lined, and it looks like the lining pieces are pretty analogous to the outside of the jacket. You can see here we have a front yoke, a front, side front. You can see the princess seam here for the side front. Hope you can. Lining seams can be hard to see sometimes. There's that. And same thing on the other side. Right there. But there's no center front seam along here like there is on the jacket. So, you know, for whatever reason, no front seam. Hey, if I press this down a little bit, you can see the boning channels here. Look at that. Let me zoom in. I don't know if you see the little crease between them. Whatever. Might not be that interesting to look at. Then on the back, you know, kind of the same thing. We have... Oh, let me zoom back out. Sorry. We have back yoke. We have back. Side back. Got the princess seam going on. But something I never figured out was why there's this extra panel on the back for some reason. So here's the back yoke. Here's the center back. Here's the sleeve. Here's the side back. I don't know what's going on with this. I don't know what this is. It's just the back yoke. Like the shape of it is the same as the back yoke, but with an extra seam here for some reason. It goes all the way from center back all the way over to the sleeve, and serves no purpose that I can discern. And it wasn't an accident. The same thing's on the other side too. I have no idea why the seam is here. It doesn't add any wearing ease It's not like it expands it outward toward the arm side to accommodate for some sleeve cappies or something. I mean, I have no idea. No idea, but it looks very intentional. So you see, there it goes. Whatever, man. The other thing was the sleeves. The sleeve lining doesn't have an outer sleeve seam. So here's the yoke. Here are the yokes. You can see the yokes and the shoulder seam. Here's the sleeve lining, but there's no outer sleeve lining seam. It would be right here. There was. Of course, there is on the outside of the jacket. Right, you have the yoke, shoulder, outer sleeve. Here. Nope, no seam. There's an undersleeve or inner sleeve seam though, right here. I mean, there would have to be. This sleeve has to close somehow. Here are the shoulder pads. Big ass shoulder pads. You know, your typical early TNG shoulder pads. Like you've seen before in my videos with the TNG Scant, the Season 1 Admiral, Pulaski smock? No, that had, that one didn't have shoulder pads, didn't come with shoulder pads. I mean, it was intended to be worn with shoulder pads, but they weren't with the costume. And these look like the others do in construction. You have the black lining with the padding, and then there's the dart. It's basically an oval with a dart sewn in it to give it this shape. Except for the edges on this one are overlocked or serged rather than cut with pinking shears, and they're detachable too, which is something we started seeing a lot later in the modern era of the franchise. You see there's a snap, and there it is, right at the end. There's the other snap. So anyway, a couple snaps, raglan style shoulder pads. Now, here's the trippy thing. So you see these shoulder pads. Now inside the lining, the jacket assembly, there's another pair of shoulder pads. You can kind of see the edge right there. Kind of following it with my finger here. So, oh, hey, there you can see the kind of the imprint of it against the lining. So there's a shoulder pad on the inside, then there's another one. So I don't know if this was made and then, you know, they were hoping that these shoulder pads would be enough. You know, like with line garments, you know, like suit jackets or whatever, usually the shoulder pads are sewn into the jacket. They're permanently attached, and then the lining covers them. You can't get to them. But with a lot of the modern era TNG costumes, the shoulder pads were detachable. So I don't know if maybe these were, you know, they were kind of hoping these would be enough, and then, you know, during a fitting with the actor, you know, it didn't work, so they had to slap more. Maybe this was to compensate. I really don't know. Between the double shoulder pads and all the interfacing on the front, that actor was not a big guy. So, you know, maybe they really wanted to beef him up to, you know, make him look a little, you know, more heroic or whatever with his silhouette. I don't know. You know, we have all the interfacing and structuring, and then we have double shoulder pads up here. And here at the bottom of the sleeves, again, like I said, here's that piping that was made out of the yoke fabric, custom piping, and the lining extends all the way down to the end of the sleeve. Right there, its edge is sewn to the edge of the piping. These, where the piping met, it was just turned under, and the lining edges sewn right there to compensate. Notice there's no pleat. No jump pleat. The lining's just sewn. Same with the bottom of the jacket. Normally with line garments, structured garments, you usually have a little pleat at the bottom for wearing these. So you can pull it. But there's not one on here. This lining's just hand sewn to the hem allowance. And last thing I'll mention with the jacket is these rank bars up here. This was the first time we ever saw these in Star Trek. This was something that Dorinda Rice Wood created as part of her uniform design. And of course we saw it through the rest of the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, and the TNG movie. So it all started right here with this uniform that got a grand total of like 1.5 minutes of screen time between the two admirals that we saw. But Dorinda Rice Wood is really she's kind of an unsung hero with Star Trek. She left such a legacy. She was only around for a year, and she didn't get to do a lot of the things she wanted to do. She wanted to redesign the Starfleet uniforms, and maybe she had a minor victory, like she got to redo the Admiral uniform, and then she changed some subtle details on the jumpsuits. Either, I don't know if she was just being cheeky and that flew under the radar with the producers, or if that's as much leeway as she had. She created Dr. Pulaski's medical smock uniform. We never saw that on another character, but she accomplished so much in so little, and a lot of us taken for granted. She changed Wesley's uniform. She changed Counselor Troy's costume. She changed Worf's baldric, which he wore for the rest of the franchise. Geordi's visor changed, although I don't know if that was her or if that was more of a props thing, but it happened on her watch. She established the look for Guinan. She established the look for the Borg. I mean, so much that we just kind of take for granted that was her responsibility, her contribution to the franchise. And these Admiral rank bars, even though we never really saw this uniform again after season 2, the rank bars, costume designer Robert Blackman incorporated them into every version of his Admiral uniform that we saw. There were 3 more after this one in the modern era, before Enterprise. Well, I guess 4 if you count that tiny little moment in First Contact with that weird uniform. But these rank bars, they were a thing. They started with this uniform. They started with Dorinda Rice Wood, so that's pretty cool. Just wanted to mention that, and we'll move on to the trousers. These trousers are tiny, just like the jacket, but they're still way too big for me to fit in a frame. So we'll just kind of start at the top and work our way down. So most obviously, there is a kind of a tank top attachment. Some auction listings describe it as like a vest attachment, or overalls style trousers. Whatever, you hear it called different things. I call it a tank top because it looks like a tank top to me. And the tank top attachment is made out of black cotton lycra, which I think is a good choice because it breathes better. It would be a lot more comfortable to wear, for an actor on a hot set, especially underneath that heavy jacket. So I'll show you here. The trousers part is actually made out of jumbo spandex, which is, more what you would expect with an early TNG era uniform. And then we have this lightweight spandex red trim going down the front. It's not jumbo spandex, it's a different spandex. I would guess that it's the same spandex used for the neckline trim and the yoke piping on the jumpsuits, and previously on the scants on Dr. Pulaski's uniform. There's early TNG era uniforms for the trim. It's lightweight spandex. That's my theory anyway. That's what it is. Let me rotate this around. So here you can see it's the jumbo spandex with the dull side out, of course, even though it's still a little shiny and sparkly. I don't know if you can see that. Let me turn on the light. There it goes. So we have jumbo spandex, mystery lightweight spandex, and cotton lycra up here. The neckline and armholes on the vest attachment here are hemmed. They don't really need to be. It's not like cotton lycra frays or unravels or anything, but it's a nice touch. You never see it in the show. They just turn the end under, hem it on both the neckline and the armholes. You can see the stitching. So they were hemmed. Just, you know, makes a nicer presentation, even though you never see it in the show. It's just, you know, whatever. The sleeves on your t-shirt and tank tops are hemmed, and they don't need to be. It just makes it look nicer. And the trousers, pretty high-waisted, of course. The jacket's not that long, but the trousers zip up and down the front like that. There's a center front seam, of course, and the trousers goes all the way up to the neckline on the vest attachment. It's a very long invisible zipper. It's another 30-inch zipper, so you see it goes down not about as far as zippers normally would, but then there's another look how much zipper is tucked inside. 30-inch invisible zipper to zip up these trousers. And there's the trim that I mentioned, which is actually sewn into a seam. There is a side front seam that goes all the way from the waist seam down to the bottom. See the seam allowances here. Trim is sewn into a seam. Those allowances are pressed toward the front, and the trim is pressed outward toward the side. And interestingly, this trim is not quite a perfect match for the color of the jacket. It's really close. Again, it's a purpley color. Here's that biking red, just for you to compare. This trim makes that look orange. It's wild. How purpley, how blue that trim is. The paint job I found that I thought was a good match for it is, again, Valspar 1010-8. It's called Poetic Purple. It's not a perfect match, but it's pretty close. Closest I found, anyway. So, just for a reference, here's the paint chip I use for the jacket. You can see it's a little too off, or it's a little off, a little too dark, a little too purple, whatever. So they're close. Here are the two. Here are the two chips. They're really close. I have to angle it so the gloss doesn't, you know, go wild. So close. The thread was another close match. There's nothing even in the vicinity of the Coates & Clark 3090 red plum. So again, it was the closest match, although it is a better match for this than the other stuff. It's pretty close. Pantone was, again, unhelpful, but here, let me open it up to the hem allowance where we have a little more color to work with. Yeah, Pantone was, again, unhelpful, although 228U was, again, kind of the closest. Just not dark enough. So something in there. Here on the back, the bottom, we have the opening split in the lower front pant legs, very characteristic of TNG era costumes, and elastic stirrup, which we see on pretty much everything. Now this piece of trim right here is a separate piece. So on to this side, you can see the seam allowances are clipped near the bottom, and then this second piece is sewn on to the other side. That has a huge hem allowance, 3 inches So my guess would be that the actor tried on the pants and they were too long, so they got hemmed more than they would have been. So that's the outside of the trousers. Inside, I just want to point out that these seam allowances are huge. I'm guessing they needed to be able to alter them, you know, for the actor fitting or whatever. So we have 1-inch seam allowance on the center front. Sometimes it goes down to like 7/8 of an inch or something. Beneath the zipper, though, it's clipped down to 1/2 inch. I'm assuming to accommodate for the you know, the crotch curve. You wouldn't be able to press that open with 1-inch seam allowance. I don't think. I've never tried. Seems unlikely. Then the side seams, there's a full 1-inch seam allowance on the trousers, but only a 1/2 inch on the vest attachment. You know, much more reasonable, much more normal 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then inch down here, then it's kind of like tapered out to a 1/2 inch around the hips. But then it tapered back to a full inch by the bottom. So I'm guessing maybe they were it was let out for the hips. Maybe the hips were too tight on the actor, or they were trimmed to accommodate the curve going around the hips. Then the center back seam allowance was also 1 inch at the waist seam where it met the tank top attachment. But then it tapered down to a 1/2 inch. So I don't know if it was designed to be that way, or maybe if these trousers were fit to the actor. You know, that's common enough where you you know, you go in for fitting and you try on the trousers, and then you know, they're left open in the back, and then you just kind of pin them into place along the back, and then that becomes your seam line. So it's just made to fit the wearer. So you know, I don't know. They could be trimmed. Could be any number of things. You just never know with Star Trek. You just never know with Star Trek costumes. How cool was that? And now, as promised, a special treat.
Yeah, you start without me?
No. I'm filming a different thing right now. It doesn't have anything to do with...
What's that?
This is a screen-used costume.
It was in the movie?
Well, a TV show.
Can I touch it?
Nope. Well, maybe later. Look, I'm filming a thing right now for some people, so let me finish that first.
Okay.
Doing a thing.
I'm gonna go make some nachos.
Alright, and then we'll get back to work. Anyway, like I was about to say, I extrapolated a sewing pattern from this uniform using a technique that I learned in a book called 101 Sewing Secrets from the Singer Reference Library. It's a cool book, and I'll put a link down below for those of you who are interested. But I'm putting the pattern that I extrapolated from this uniform on my blog, the Star Trek Costume Guide, where you can download it for free. That's www.startrekcostumeguide.com. Now, a couple heads up. First, this uniform is tiny. It's about a men's size 36-ish, and according to both Google and IMDb, actor Clyde Kusatsu, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, who played Admiral Nakamura, is only 5'5", so this uniform is very small. And second, these are large format engineering prints. They're the same large sheets that I use for our Bad Wolf costumes patterns. There are 2 pages, the jacket's on the first page, and the trousers are on the second page. Just worked out that way, which is pretty cool. But unless you have access to a large format printer, you'll probably have to go to your local copy and print shop to have them actually print the pattern for you. Although someone has mentioned recently that you can print large format sheets on your standard printer at home, just in little chunks or installments or whatever. I haven't tried this, so I don't know if it'll work or not. If you try it, let me know if it works, and I can start telling people if that's an option. But for now, I usually just recommend going to your local copy and print shop and having them print the pattern for you. As of right now, I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to do fully graded Bad Wolf costumes patterns for this uniform. It's a lot of work, and hard work doesn't really bother me, but it just seems like such wasted effort without a source for the trim. It's just such an integral component of this uniform, and like I said, it just seems like wasted effort. But if you have a supply of this trim, or you know where to source it, or even a decent substitute, please leave a comment down below or send me a Facebook message or an email. I'd love to hear from you, and I know a lot of fans would love to have a source for this trim as well. But in the meantime, the pattern's there on the blog, You can download for free, knock yourself out. As always, thanks for watching, and subscribe to my channel for more video tours, sewing tutorials, and other cool costuming videos.